Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last September, India had scripted history after the Rajya Sabha had passed the 128th Constitutional Amendment Bill 2023, which is aimed at bringing 33% reservation for women in the Lok Sabha and in all state legislative assemblies. This bill, which almost every government in one way or the other had tried to push since 1996, also extends the quota to seats reserved for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Now, this move is expected to have a wide impact on the Indian politics, and the BJP has been hoping that it would help them gain more women voters, which is a core support base for the party. Talking about the bill during the special session of the parliament, PM Modi had said that perhaps he was the chosen one for empowering and strengthening women, and that all MPs should come together to open the doors for empowerment of Nari Shakti.
महिलाओं को अधिकार देने का, महिलाओं की शक्ति का उपयोग करने का वो काम शायद ईश्वर ने ऐसे कई पवित्र काम के लिए मुझे चुना है और देश की नारी शक्ति के लिए सभी सांसद मिलकर के नए प्रवेश द्वार खोल दें, इसका आरंभ हम इस महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय से करने जा रहे हैं.
Now, even though this bill was passed more than 6 months ago, it is still unclear when it will actually be implemented. And this is because, unlike the previous bills on women's reservation, this one is linked to the delimitation exercise, which is the contentious exercise of fixing or redrawing the boundaries of constituencies in a country. So today, on the occasion of Women's Day, we are revisiting an episode we did when the bill was first passed in the Lok Sabha. In the show, we looked at what its implementation will entail, why it was criticized, and the attempts that were made to pass such a bill in the past. And we began with my colleague Shashank Bhargav speaking to Indian Express's Apurva Vishwanath.
Apurva, could you begin by telling us what exactly this bill states and how would the 33% reservation work?
So the constitution amendments basically provide for 1/3 reservation of seats in the Lok Sabha and all state assemblies for women. So that's what the bill clearly says. These will be done by introducing new provisions to the constitution, Article 330A and Article 332A. So these new provisions specify that 1/3 of seats in the Lok Sabha and the legislative assemblies respectively will be reserved for women. These amendments are also being made in the provisions where a similar reservation is provided for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So wherever that quota is mentioned, a new provision will now be inserted for women.
Okay, so once the 33% women's reservation is implemented, out of the 84 seats that are right now reserved for the SC category, for example, would 28 out of them be reserved for women who belong in the SC category?
Yes, so the 1/3 women's quota is like a horizontal quota across all seats. So imagine two vertical bars, one for the general category and one which is the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe reserved seats in the parliament, right? Both these together make the 543 seats that we have right now. And then imagine a bar running through both of these horizontally. That's the women's reservation. So 33% of seats already reserved for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe will be for women of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And 33% of seats which are in the general category will be for women in the general category.
Okay, so right now the general category seats are 412. So once this new reservation is implemented, 137 seats will be reserved for women in the category.
Yes.
And Apurva, right now there are 82 women MPs in the Lok Sabha. How much is this reservation expected to increase this number?
So overall, the idea is that at least 181 women will be in parliament whenever this quota is implemented. That is a minimum, because there could be seats which are not reserved for women where women can contest and still win. So what we're looking at with women's reservation is a minimum of 181 women in the parliament.
And does the bill mention how long this reservation is supposed to last for?
So there is a sunset clause in the bill itself, the constitutional amendment itself, which says that this quota will be for a period of 15 years from the date that it commences. A similar sunset clause is also there for SC/ST reservations, but that keeps extending, every now and then. So unless there is political will to end this quota, the sunset clause can always be amended.
And Apurva, the previous governments have attempted to clear bills in the past in order to implement women's reservation. Could you tell us how those bills differ from this one?
So the crucial difference or the defining characteristic of this bill is that it makes women's reservation contingent on the delimitation exercise. The delimitation exercise is very contentious. And what the Constitution amendments now say is that is decided and that is going to take place after the first census, after this bill has been passed. So now whenever we have the next census, after that, there is definitely going to be a delimitation exercise. So this, which from the 42nd Amendment, successive governments kept freezing this and pushing this forward, is now a reality.
So basically, in terms of rolling out, first the census would need to take place, then the delimitation exercise, and then we can see it being implemented.
Yes. So as things stand, the earliest at the census exercise, which was supposed to happen earlier, and because of COVID, we had a delay, the 2021 exercise can now be expected to happen in 2025. So that, say, will take about a year and a half. After that, the census numbers will be published. And after that, you would have a delimitation exercise, which again could take anywhere between a year and a half to 2 years. So the timeline that you're probably looking at is not before the 2029 elections.
And Apurva, do we know why the government has chosen to link the women's reservation bill with the delimitation exercise?
So that is a very clear political message that the government is sending with the women's reservation. To implement women's reservation itself, you don't need to peg it with the delimitation exercise. But this in a way also ties the opposition up in knots because you can't support one while opposing the other. So when the women's reservation bill gets passed, automatically the delimitation process, the ball starts rolling. And that has been a contentious issue, not just for this government, but since the 1970s. And the delimitation exercise would also require consensus building with the states, with all political parties. And now that being a reality, states will have to get on board.
And could you also explain to our listeners why delimitation, this exercise of redrawing constituencies, is such a contentious issue?
So the way seats in our parliament are now decided is based on population, right? For every, say, approximately 15 lakh people, we have an elected representative. With the redrawing of boundaries, what is the fear is that wherever there has been a population decline in a progressive way, which you see in many of the southern states, you're likely to see a lowering of representation, whereas states which have not done so well on socioeconomic indicators might stand to gain from the delimitation process. So with fewer representation, states which have done well on socioeconomic indicators do fear that they will be penalized for doing well. So this is going to be a big challenge between the southern states and some of the states which haven't been doing so well, like Bihar or UP. And this is not a new issue. This is something that even in 1970 was a big point of contention, which is why the 42nd Amendment froze the delimitation exercise and pushed it to a later date. And again, the Vajpayee government also delayed this. And the idea was that we will continue with the same number of seats we have in the Lok Sabha, even in the states. For example, what we now have is an interstate delimitation, which means, earlier, say, if Chandni Chowk had a population of 5 lakh people, and Outer Delhi had a population of 25 lakh people. That has sort of been redistributed to make sure, Outer Delhi has more representation and Chandni Chowk might have lesser, but all of that within the boundaries of a state. The state's representation itself in the Lok Sabha had not been altered. With the delimitation exercise that is set to take place next, that will be a crucial issue that will have to be debated.
Okay, so it's clear that the women's reservation won't be implemented till at least 2029. But talking about the reserved seats themselves, do we know how they will be selected? How they will decide which ones are to be reserved?
So the framework we have to understand this is, of course, the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe reservation that we have in our parliament. And for this, the Delimitation Act 2002 lays down broad principles on how these seats are reserved. So what is taken into consideration is the population. So in a district where there is substantially large population of scheduled caste, that is reserved to be a SC seat in that state. But that can be done in the case of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. But for women, where you would probably have an equal number of population, right? Like women almost everywhere will be about 50%. It could be 46 somewhere, 48 somewhere, 51 somewhere, but it would largely be half and half. So in that case, how seats will be picked is very important. Both the 2010 bill that ultimately didn't get passed in the Lok Sabha and the current one don't talk about the modalities of this. So this could perhaps be in a separate legislation which will follow, which will actually operationalize this. That would be the Women's Reservation Bill, right? But one way could actually be lottery or rotation, because if it's 50-50, there is no other way but to rotate these seats.
And Apurva, right now we do have reservation for women in Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies. Could you tell us when this provision was introduced?
So the 73rd Constitution Amendment, 73rd and 74th Constitution Amendment introduced reservation for women in Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies. So in Panchayati Raj, at least 18 states, more than 50% reservation exists for women. Tamil Nadu, Orissa, Kerala, Telangana, a lot of these states have close to 50% reservation for women. And the highest proportion of women representatives was in Uttarakhand at 56%. So overall, we've seen women's reservation work very well in one layer of elections, which is our local bodies. And now this will be extended to state legislatures and the Lok Sabha.
Now, shortly after the Women's Reservation Bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha, the opposition parties started criticizing it on two accounts. The first, of course, was that it has been linked to the delimitation exercise and that its implementation date has been kept vague. TMC leader Mahua Moitra took a jab at the BJP in this regard and even said that the bill should be renamed as the Women's Reservation Rescheduling Bill.
In true BJP's Goebbelsian doublespeak style, it means we don't know if and actually when we will actually have 33% of women sitting in the Lok Sabha. Because number one, the date of the next census is entirely indeterminate. Because of this, number two, the date of the next delimitation exercise is therefore doubly indeterminate. Can there be a greater jumla? What this government has brought here today is not a women's reservation bill. It is a women's reservation rescheduling bill and should be renamed as such. Its agenda is delay. Its agenda is not reservation.
Now, Moitra's sentiments were also echoed by many other members of the parliament. But besides the issue of delimitation, the opposition parties also criticized the government for not providing a quota for other backward classes. Congress leader Sonia Gandhi, for example, demanded reservation for OBCs, which was in sync with the larger opposition bloc's demand for a caste census.
भारतीय राष्ट्रीय कांग्रेस की मांग है कि यह बिल फौरन अमल में लाया जाए, लेकिन इसके साथ ही कास्ट सेंसस कराकर शेड्यूल कास्ट, शेड्यूल ट्राइब, ओबीसीज की महिलाओं के आरक्षण की व्यवस्था की भी जाए.
Similarly, talking about the need for an OBC quota, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi said that only 3 out of the 90 secretaries in the government of India are OBCs, and that this number is an insult to the community.
Speaker, sir, this discussion is about the transfer of power to the people of India. The women being one group of the people of India and the OBC community being another group of the people of India. And I am elaborating that the OBCs, who number a huge percentage, have 3% of the 90 secretaries of this country and control and define 5% of India's budget. This is an insult and a shame to the OBC community. ये OBC community का अपमान है. तो सवाल उठता है कि इस देश में कितने ओबीसी हैं, कितने दलित हैं, कितने आदिवासी हैं और उस सवाल का जवाब सिर्फ कास्ट सेंसस से मिल सकता है.
Also adding to these criticisms, we also heard from AIMIM leader Asaduddin Owaisi, who said that the Modi government wants to increase representation only for Savarna women.
This Modi government wants increased representation for Savarna women. They don't want representation for OBC women and for Muslim women, sir. This bill will deny fair share to OBCs. This bill will close the doors for the Muslim representation in the parliament and in the assembly, sir.
Now, as we mentioned in the beginning of the episode, multiple governments have tried to pass a women's reservation bill in the past. And it was actually first introduced in 1996. When we spoke to Indian Express's Manoj CG, he told us about it.
It was 27 years ago, to be precise, when a United Front government was in power, headed by Prime Minister H.D. Devegowda. So it was on September 12, 1996, that the Women's Reservation Bill, which envisages basically reservation of 1/3 of the seats in Lok Sabha and state assemblies, was first introduced.
He says that at the time, the bill came as a surprise to many because several leaders from within the ruling Janata Dal party had been opposed to it.
Who were even then also demanding a quota within quota, which means a certain percent seats reserved for OBC women belonging to other backward classes within the Women's Reservation Bill.
This, of course, is what parties like the Congress have demanded even this time.
So it did not move forward, and once the United Front government fell, the bill kind of lapsed.
Later on, in 1998, during the tenure of the NDA government, under the leadership of the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, another attempt was made to reintroduce the bill. This, however, led to chaos in the parliament. In fact, Manoj recalls the incident when an RJD MP named Surendra Prasad Yadav brazenly snatched the bill and tore it into pieces.
Recently, a couple of months back, when he was asked about the reason for him, snatching the copies and tearing it, he interestingly said B.R. Ambedkar had appeared in his dream and asked him to do so. So most of the times when the bill was introduced or the bill was taken up for discussion, almost every time there was ruckus, the copies were snatched or they were torn apart. So the Vajpayee government made this attempt, but even they could not move forward. On December 11, the same year in 1998, they tried to introduce the bill again. That time, Mamata Banerjee, who was initial years of the Trinamool Congress then, what we understand is that she tried to stop Samajwadi Party MP who apparently thought that the bill is going to be introduced. So it was not clear whether that bill is going to be introduced. There was this buzz that the bill could be introduced, so he was rushing towards the speaker's podium. Ms. Mamata Banerjee apparently caught hold of his collar and all to stop him, because she was vociferously in favor of the bill then.
He says the next attempt to reserve seats for women came in 2008, nearly 10 years later, during the Congress-led UPA government. This was the time when the RJD was part of the government.
And the scenes were the same. In fact, when the then Law Minister, Mr. H.R. Bharadwaj, he rose to table the bill in Rajya Sabha, the women MPs of the Congress had to, stand around him. He was on the second row. On the first row were the women MPs, shielding him from MPs trying to snatch the bill. The likes of Renuka Chowdhury, who was then the Women and Child Development Minister, and others cordoned off him. And the SP MPs hurled pieces of torn papers and all. Mr. Abu. So it was big drama. And the bill was then referred to a standing committee.
But in the end, nothing much came out of it. And then, after 14 years of back and forth, the bill finally saw a glimmer of hope in 2010 when the upper house of the parliament passed it. However, according to Manoj, this breakthrough came because the political equations had changed over time. Parties like RJD, JDU and SP, which had opposed the bill since 1996, were no longer part of the coalition government.
In UPA 2, RJD was an outside supporter, same as Samajwadi Party and parties like the BSP and all. And the JDU, whose leader Nitish Kumar had given a dissent note in 1996 saying, he was in favor of quota within quota, he kind of nuanced his position and supported the bill. So in 2010, for the first time, the bill got cleared by one House of Parliament, but the UPA clearly did not want to precipitate matters by, taking it to Lok Sabha. And the bill never came to the Lok Sabha in that sense, and women's reservation never saw the light of the day.
He says that the only reason the bill did not pass was because of the demand for an OBC quota, essentially a quota within a quota. Manoj says that the parties that have consistently made these demands over the years are predominantly from UP and Bihar.
Primarily, their vote base, in case of the Samajwadi Party, it's the Yadav and the Muslims, famously called the MY combination. And even the RJD, Lalu Prasad Yadav's party, it is Yadavs and Muslims form the major backbone of their vote bases. And it's an OBC vote bank that both these parties have. So in terms of, practical, pragmatic electoral politics, this is a message that they wanted to convey.
Now, Manoj says that the critics of these parties believe that this is pure patriarchy at play, and that men in these parties don't wish to empower women.
And there are not many women leaders in these parties, unlike, say, the Congress or unlike, say, the BJP and the national parties or many of the regional parties. There are not many women leaders in Samajwadi Party or RJD. So they may even find it difficult to get good candidates. So these are, arguments of the critics. But they believe the position that both Samajwadi Party and RJD and even JMM in Jharkhand now and the JDU, they had taken was that if 33% reservation comes into place, the women from the forward communities, the so-called elite of the society, they will, get tickets, not the weaker sections.
Now, in some ways, this criticism continues to be there about the current bill as well, especially because the demand for an OBC quota is still there. But unlike previous attempts, Manoj says that this time the government has a huge majority in the Lok Sabha, and the political differences on this issue have narrowed down considerably.
And the government is clearly showing the will to take the bill to its logical conclusion, which the UPA government could not do, because apart from 3 or 4 smaller parties, the names which were discussed earlier, all the other opposition parties are on board. They may point out that this bill doesn't have a quota within quota and this bill is a post-dated commitment, it doesn't kick in immediately. They may raise all those points during the discussion in both the houses, but most of the opposition parties are committed to supporting the bill. So when the government shows that kind of a political will to push through the bill and with the opposition on board, it will get cleared, unlike on previous occasions.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank Bhargav and me, Niharika Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.